Thousands of people reached out after the last video with the exact same question. You all wanted to know more about that stove. So, I went back to find out. There is a specific stove in a farmhouse located in Holmes County, Ohio, that has not been fed any fuel since early this morning. It burned for only 1 hour. 2 small logs were used, and then they were gone. The fire is completely out. Yet, that house will remain warm until tomorrow morning without anyone needing to touch the stove again. I know this for a fact because I placed my hand on the wall of that stove at 10:30 at night, which was 6 hours after the fire had died out. It was still warm. It wasn't hot enough to cause a burn, but it was warm like a living body. The family living inside was paying absolutely nothing, not a single dollar, to any utility company for their heat. When I asked the man who constructed that stove how much it cost him to build, he told me $50. $50. And then he shared something with me that I was not prepared to hear. He said, "The reason you have never seen one of these is not because they do not work. It is because they work too well, and in 37 states, they are actually illegal to build." That is exactly what this video is about. A heating system that costs $50 burns 90% less wood than the stove you have at home and radiates consistent warmth for up to 24 hours from a single fire that lasts less than 90 minutes. The Amish did not actually invent it. They inherited the design. Their ancestors brought the concept from Germany over 200 years ago, and they never stopped using it, even when the rest of America forgot it ever existed. The first time I walked into one of these homes near Millersburg, I spent 20 minutes searching for a thermostat. There was no thermostat, there was no furnace, and there were no ducts. There was simply a large, warm structure in the center of the house that looked more like a bench than a stove, and every single room in that house was the exact same temperature. It wasn't hot near the fire and cold by the window. It was the same everywhere. I had never experienced anything like that in my life, but here is where the story gets truly interesting. I dug deep into the history of this system, and I discovered something that stopped me in my tracks. Mark Twain, yes, that Mark Twain, wrote about this exact type of stove in 1878 after traveling through Germany. He described it as the best stove ever invented. He wrote that one single firing is enough for the entire day. The cost is next to nothing, and the heat produced remains the same all day long instead of being too hot and then too cold by turns. That was 147 years ago. And yet, most Americans have still never heard of it. Before I explain how this system works and exactly how you can build one, including if you already own a home, I need to tell you what it replaced. Because the only way to truly understand why this system matters is to understand how badly the thing in your basement is failing you right now. A conventional wood stove, the kind you probably grew up with, burns at about 1,000 degrees inside the firebox. That sounds impressive until you realize what happens next. At 1,000 degrees, the wood does not burn completely. The smoke, the gases, and the volatile compounds escape up the chimney at 400 to 600 degrees. Every time you look outside and see smoke coming out of a chimney, you are literally watching heat leave the house. You are watching money float away into the sky. The number they print on the box is 75% efficient. However, that is a laboratory number. In a real home with real wood, operated by a real person, the actual efficiency is closer to 35%. That means 65% of the heat your wood could have given you is going straight up the flue. And that is not even the worst part. That incomplete combustion creates creosote, which is a tar-like buildup inside your chimney that causes house fires. So, you are losing most of your heat, and creating a major fire hazard at the same time. Now, I want you to picture something. You are standing next to your wood stove in January. You have been feeding it logs every 2 hours since dinner. The house is warm near the stove, but cold in the bedroom. The chimney is putting out a column of white and gray smoke that you can see from the road. And you are thinking, this is just how it works. This is what heating a home with wood looks like. It is not. That is what wasting wood looks like. And the Amish knew a better way 300 years ago. Here is what their stove does differently. The principle is the exact opposite of everything you have been taught about burning wood. Instead of burning slow and continuous, you burn intense and fast. The combustion chamber is shaped like a J or an L. The fire enters horizontally through a feed tube. You lay small sticks in sideways, not stacked up. The wood travels through a horizontal burn tunnel, and then the hot gases rise through an insulated vertical tube called a heat riser. Inside that tube, the temperature reaches 1800 degrees. At 1800 degrees, something remarkable happens. The smoke itself catches fire. The gases that would have escaped up a normal chimney actually burn. What comes out the other end is not black smoke. It is water vapor and carbon dioxide. The exhaust temperature leaving this system is between 90 and 100 degrees. Compare that to 400 or 600 degrees from your conventional stove. That entire difference, 300 to 500 degrees, is heat that stayed inside the house instead of leaving through the roof. But that is only half the story. In a normal stove, whatever heat does stay in the house radiates from a metal box. Metal heats fast and cools fast. The moment the fire dies, the heat starts disappearing. This system does something completely different. The hot gases from that combustion chamber do not go straight outside. They travel horizontally through a massive bench made of brick, stone, or cob, a mixture of clay, sand, and straw. That bench absorbs the heat before it can escape, and then it releases it slowly over the next 12 to 24 hours like a battery, a thermal battery. The surface of that bench is never dangerously hot. Children sit on it, and animals sleep next to it. It is warm the way a sunlit stone wall is warm on an autumn afternoon. Comfortable, constant, and safe. The Amish families I visited used the bench like furniture. The kids do homework on it after school, and the grandmother reads there in the evening. One man told me he had not turned on a space heater or plugged in an electric blanket in 17 years. He said, "Why would I? The bench is warm when I wake up. It is warm when I go to sleep. And it is warm in between." That is real heating. And here is the thing that made me feel like a fool. The wood you burn in this system is not the thick split logs you are used to hauling from a woodpile. It is sticks, thin, dry hardwood about the thickness of your thumb. Fallen branches, garden clippings, or scrap wood from the shop. You light it with a match and some newspaper. In 2 to 3 minutes, the heat riser gets hot enough to create what builders call the rocket effect, a roaring updraft that sounds like a jet engine in miniature. You feed it wood for 45 to 90 minutes, then you stop. The fire goes out on its own, and for the next 12 to 24 hours, the bench radiates heat into every corner of the room. Now, let me give you the numbers, because numbers are what separate a nice story from a decision you can actually make. Ianto Evans, a Welsh-born builder living in Coquille, Oregon, who documented and popularized the modern version of the system through his work at the Aprovecho Research Center, reported that he went from burning 4 to 5 cords of wood per winter with a conventional stove to about 2/3 of a cord with the rocket mass heater. Same house, same climate, same square footage. That is an 80 to 90% reduction in fuel. To put that in perspective, A cord of wood is a stack 4 feet wide, 4 feet high, and 8 feet long. He went from needing a wood pile the size of a truck to needing a wood pile that fits in a wheelbarrow. Other builders across the country report similar results. Some homeowners in moderate climates say they heat their entire house with fallen branches from their own yard. No chainsaw, no splitting, no buying wood, just picking up sticks the way your grandfather picked up kindling when he was 8 years old. The average American household spends $1,400 to $2,400 a year on heating. Over a 30-year mortgage, that is $42,000 to $72,000 just to keep your house warm. The system I am describing costs $50 to $100 in materials: a steel barrel, 20 or 30 fire bricks, some clay from the garden, a metal tube for the heat riser, and refractory mortar. That is it. You can build the basic version in a weekend. Let that sink in. $42,000 over 30 years, or $50 once. Now, you might be thinking, if this works so well, why has nobody told me about it? And that is where the story takes a turn that made me angry the first time I heard it. This technology is not new. The German version, called the Kachelofen, has been documented for over 1,000 years. During the 15th century, the forests of Central Europe were disappearing. Wood scarcity was a national crisis in Germany and Austria. A specialized profession emerged, craftsmen called Hafnermeister, whose entire job was to build stoves that could heat a house all day with the smallest possible amount of wood. The Kachelofen was their masterpiece, a ceramic stove that burns small, burns hot, burns complete, and then radiates heat for an entire day. These craftsmen were paid like architects. Their stoves were considered national treasures, and the basic principle behind them, that stone stores heat and metal wastes it, goes back even further. Archaeologists have found precursors in the Bronze Age Alps, roughly 2,500 years before Christ. A fire surrounded by stones. The stones absorb the heat, and the heat radiates long after the fire is gone. 4,500 years of proven technology. And it was not just Europe. The Chinese developed the Kong, a raised stone platform for sleeping, heated by a fire channel underneath that kept families warm through the night. The Koreans built the Ondol, radiant floor heating through stone channels, more than 2,000 years ago. The Romans used the Hippocaust, the same concept of channeling hot air beneath stone floors to heat entire buildings. On every continent, independently, across thousands of years, human beings arrived at the same conclusion. Stone stores heat. Metal wastes it. A chimney that lets hot air escape is not a feature. It is a design flaw. And yet, here we are in America, still building houses with metal ductwork and chimneys that throw heat into the sky. The Amish of Ohio and Pennsylvania are of German-Swiss origin. When they emigrated in the 18th and 19th centuries, they brought the Kachelofen with them. And here is the critical difference. They never abandoned it. When the rest of America switched to forced air central heating in the 1950s, the Amish kept building masonry heaters. They did not switch because the old way was better. They knew it. Their grandparents knew it. Their great-grandparents knew it. But the rest of America forgot. And that forgetting was not an accident. In 1950, manufacturers of central heating systems launched the forced air furnace as a symbol of modern American life. Magazine ads showed smiling families in front of chrome-plated vents. The message was clear. If you still had a masonry stove in your house, you were behind. You were old-fashioned. You were poor. The old ways, masonry heaters, radiant heat, thermal mass, were labeled as primitive, outdated, something your immigrant grandfather used because he did not know any better. And it worked. Within a single generation, an entire country abandoned a heating method that had worked for 1,000 years and replaced it with a system that requires monthly payments until the day you die. The American heating industry today generates over $30 billion a year in revenue. Every house built with forced air heating is a customer for life. Buying fuel, replacing filters, servicing equipment, and paying monthly bills that never stop. A house with a masonry heater is a customer who might never need anything again. That is not a customer the industry wants. That is a customer the industry needs to prevent. Now, here is the part that should make your blood boil. The modern version of this system, the rocket mass heater, has never been certified by the EPA. Not because it fails emissions tests. It has never been certified because the EPA only certifies products that are manufactured in a factory. Identical unit after identical unit. A rocket mass heater is built on site. Everyone is unique. Everyone is custom. There is no factory. There is no assembly line. There is no product to certify. And here is the number that tells you everything. A well-built rocket mass heater produces about 0.12 grams per hour of fine particulate matter. The EPA limit for a certified wood stove is 2.5 grams per hour. The rocket mass heater is 20 times cleaner than what the EPA allows as a maximum for certified stoves, and yet it is banned, not because of what comes out of it, but because of a sticker that is not on it. In 37 states, installing a rocket mass heater in your home requires you to own at least 20 contiguous acres. That is not federal law. It is a benchmark that hundreds of counties have adopted into local fire prevention codes. The average American does not own 20 acres. The average American lives on a quarter-acre lot in a suburb. The Amish farmer in Holmes County, Ohio, sitting on 100 acres, can build whatever stove he wants. The American homeowner in Columbus, 75 miles down the road, cannot. Same state, same air, same physics, different rules. And those rules have nothing to do with safety. They have to do with who writes the code. In 2022, a couple in Jackson County, Oregon, built a rocket mass heater in their home on 18.7 acres. They did everything right. They hired an independent lab to test the emissions. The results came back at 0.12 grams per hour, 20 times below the EPA limit, cleaner than a pellet stove, and cleaner than a gas furnace in some measurements. The county inspector ordered them to demolish it anyway. The hearing officer's ruling said compliance is determined by listing status, not by emission measurements. It did not matter how clean the stove was. It did not matter that the test results were better than anything on the market. The stove did not have the right paperwork, so it had to go. They tore it down at a cost of $4,200. They were forced to install a $9,800 EPA-certified stove that pollutes more than what they had. Think about that. They spent $14,000 to replace a cleaner system with a dirtier one because the cleaner one did not have a piece of paper. To certify a rocket mass heater design, a manufacturer would need to spend over $60,000 in testing, inspections, and annual fees. Initial laboratory testing costs $8,000. Factory inspection runs another $3,000. The EPA emissions test alone can exceed $25,000. And if you change anything about the design, even something minor, you pay for the entire test again. Annual maintenance fees add another $1,500 on top. All of that for a product that costs $50 to build. Only large corporations can afford that certification process. And large corporations have no interest in certifying a product that eliminates the need for their other products. The system is not designed to keep you safe. It is designed to keep you buying. Now, If you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. I hear this every single time. I live in a house built in 1972. I have a basement. I have existing ductwork. What am I supposed to do? Tear out my walls? No, you do not tear out anything. There are 3 ways to bring this technology into a home you already own. The first option is the outbuilding. Build a rocket mass heater in a shed, a garage, or a workshop attached to your house. Use the heat it generates to warm water or air and pipe that heat into your main living space. In most jurisdictions, outbuildings have less restrictive codes than the house itself. You are not modifying your home. You are heating a shed that happens to share a wall with your kitchen. I know a man in rural Tennessee who heats his entire 1,500-square-foot house this way. The stove is in his workshop, 12 feet from his back door. A simple water loop carries the heat inside. His winter heating bill last year was 0. His workshop is warm, too. He calls it his 2-for-1. The second option is a traditional masonry heater, the Kachelofan style, without the rocket element. These are exempt from EPA certification in most states if they weigh more than 1,800 pounds. That is the mass exemption written into the Federal Register in 2014. If the unit is heavy enough, the EPA considers it a masonry heater rather than a wood stove, and certification requirements do not apply. A traditional masonry heater installed by a professional costs between $3,000 and $8,000. Compare that to $42,000 in heating bills over 30 years, and the math is not even close. You will pay it off in 2 winters and then never write a check for heat again. The third option, and I want to be clear, this is not legal advice, is what thousands of people across this country are already doing quietly. In rural areas without frequent code enforcement, many homeowners build rocket mass heaters in their garage or basement without asking permission. The emissions are so low that there is virtually nothing to detect. No visible smoke, no smell, no complaints from neighbors, because there is nothing to complain about. I have read hundreds of posts in permaculture forums from people in 30 different states who have been heating this way for 5, 10, or 15 years. They are not hiding. They just stopped asking for permission to do something their great-grandparents did without a second thought. Now, before I get to the most important part of this video, I want to mention something. I put together a complete guide called the Amish Home System, which shows how to cut every household bill to 0 using methods that were legal before 1950. Step-by-step instructions for any home already built. No permits, no contractors, no new construction required. The link is in the description below. Now, the technique I have been saving for last. I found this buried in the testing records of the Aprovecho Research Center. Most people who build a rocket mass heater make the bench out of cob or standard brick. That works well, but what the data showed is that the internal channel geometry matters more than the material. Most builders run a single straight pipe through the bench, but Aprovecho tested a configuration where the internal flue makes 2 full reversals inside the bench, like a snake going back and forth. The gases travel 3 times the distance before reaching the exhaust, and the exit temperature dropped from 90 degrees to barely above ambient, meaning nearly 100% of the available heat was captured. The change costs nothing, 0 additional dollars. You are using the same pipe, just routing it differently. You double the storage time of your thermal battery. This is the same principle the Finnish used in their contraflow masonry heaters for centuries. The Amish man I visited in Holmes County already knew this. His grandfather taught him. The research center just confirmed what his family had known for generations. This knowledge exists. It has always existed, and it survived because a few communities refused to let it die. They kept heating their homes for nothing, while the rest of us wrote checks to utility companies every single month and thought that was normal. It was never normal. It was a choice someone else made for us. Mark Twain saw one of these stoves in 1878 and called it the best ever invented. He was right. We were sold something worse and charged for it every month. You do not need 20 acres. You do not need a permit. You need a weekend, $50 in materials, and the willingness to do something that is common sense. Every house in America that runs a furnace is a house that forgot something. This video is how you remember. Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you heat your home with right now and what you are paying. If this story has changed the way you look at the heat in your home, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are uncovering the history they tried to bury. Let's build a more self-reliant future together. The next treasure is waiting to be revealed.